what's the name of the file?
This file, Truck Dog, it's in a file called Jimmy and Truck Dog Videos.
Okay, so
But it's in the big file is videos in the external hard drive.
gotcha.
And you probably would have it then if you.
Yeah, I have that.
So this is in a sub-file called Jimmy and Truck Dog Videos.
Okay.
And I'll start playing one and just talk, I guess.
Right.
Also, what's interesting here is I at one point in my life I made like promo excerpts. I edited. I went into the UCSB editing media place, and they let me just edit. So, if you ever want it'll say extra. If you ever want to look at short versions of hits, you can do that too, instead of looking at the whole piece. But let me choose. Okay. Here, let me start with this. This was actually a good performance, this one. Full House. Oops, what's going on here? There it is. Turn the sound off, right?
Yeah.
So, Truck Dog is one of my most iconic mime theater creations. It's not really mime, it's theater that's very physical. And as I've mentioned before, it's really hard to put a label on and market what I've done in my artistic career. American culture and a lot of other cultures want labels to guide the public to where they want to go. I guess it's it's capitalist system as well as otherwise. I mean, labels are important to people. As an artist, because you blend so many disciplines and so many different crafts into one statement, it's hard to describe. You know, it's like trying to describe a cup of tea, or trying to describe a painting or a song. How do you describe art? You know, it's always been, and for me, especially paintings. I mean, for me, you look at it and you get your reaction from it, and that's the truth. But there's a whole thing around the expert explaining to you what the piece is. So, of course, historically, that could be important. You know, like what's one of the influences might have been for an artist. But in terms of viewing or witnessing or experiencing an art in its real time, like theater, you know, you go and you see something unfold in a time span, and then a painting in a gallery, it's similar, but probably you don't spend 2 hours staring at a painting unless you were a young student or somebody really interested in that painting. But I guess it would be similar.
Well,
but
I get what you're saying, and this is interesting, but this is theoretical. We do have a certain amount of theoretical content.
Yeah, we do.
I would like just you to comment on Truck Dog. Right?
Well, I was getting around to, okay, I'll give more, like, it's hard to describe Truck Dog. It's hard to describe because it's...
well, you have described it to me, and I could describe it some.
Describe it. I'm curious.
It's a truck it's a dog in the back of the truck, and he gets the air, and he wants his freedom, and he's looking at things, and does he get out of the truck at one point, fall out, but anyway.
But see, that's what happens. It's not about what it's about.
Okay, well,
you know, or what the foundation is. That's I mean, I'm trying to say that what I do, it's about the foundation of it. It's not about how I do it, even though I'm pretty good at certain things.
I'm just afraid
Yeah.
you talked a fair amount
I
of
agree.
theoretical, that if we spend our time on theoretical, we don't get down to the specifics necessarily.
Okay, well, maybe that's why I'm saying it's too big then, because I don't know how else to explain it. I mean, maybe you just edit things out that makes sense.
Well, but
This is okay.
the more stuff we record, it's the more stuff I have to go through.
I know.
And the more time it will take.
All right. Well, I don't. Okay, I like to take a break for a minute because I have to reassess this.
Okay.
Because I don't know what to do, but I don't know. What I'm talking to you about now is the whole problem, the whole challenge of doing this kind of art form. or doing any kind of art form. It's the challenge, you know, and it's, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I can explain what happens, but that doesn't mean anything.
Well, what were you going to say about
I was starting to.
it? You're telling me that.
But, you know,
Okay, well, if you want to, you can. It's just that.
I understand what you're saying too. I'm not holding it against you at all. I'm just saying that's the challenge, because that's why I say I don't give a shit about it, because it'll either be misunderstood or you're trying to get good footage of me now, aren't you? Like, just off the cuff stuff. Which is, that could be a good section. Anyway, that's the problem, is how do you define an art? How do you communicate an art other than it's being present in the space it's supposed to be in, whether it's a painting on the wall or a theater event. So Truck Dog is something I did for several years, probably in my prime, late prime we'll call it. And it's really a statement about my feeling about the Western United States and its culture.
Angle that a little more towards me. Okay. Yeah.
It's a story, the dog is a storyteller that rides in the back of a pickup. So at one time, dogs could ride freely in the back of pickups without leashes but now it's against the law, you know. At one time, humans could ride in the back of pickups freely and you wouldn't get a ticket. Now it's against the law. So, I mean, for safety reasons, right? So the piece is basically about the sense of independence and freedom that one might find in the Western United States. And it's very interesting. This piece was done in many different Western states. Did it in New York City once. I did it in Mexico. It was translated into Spanish because a lot of the images are derivative of farmland and the working human that's in the campo, in the fields, whether that's USA or Mexico. And the interesting thing happened at one point. Originally it was a two-man piece with Charlie Oates, one of my former students who became a very accomplished actor and writer. So we had done a two-person version. There was Truck Dog and there was Pup Dog. Talking about the generations. And so we did it at a festival in Philadelphia, an international clown theater festival, because I always thought Truck Dog was Truck Dog was a kind of clown. In other words, this opens up a whole nother theoretical place of what the clown is to a culture in the United States or in the world. So I thought this dog was a creature of the clown world, theater clown, the world of Samuel Beckett, the great writer of Ireland. So the piece was rejected in the festival by the audience because they didn't think it fit the genre of clown. Yet, one of the most famous, the most accomplished clowns in the world from the Czech Republic was in attendance. And I met him in an elevator after the show, and he said, "James, can you send me the script? This is fantastic." So, sure. So I sent the script.
What's his name?
His name is Tibor Turba, who nobody knows outside of Europe. But in my mind, one of the most skilled and thoughtful clowns that was ever born. Coming from the Czech Republic, which is a country in the direct center of Europe that has been crossed by armies and different influences throughout the centuries. So all those seeds have gone into creating the Czech people, which are very interesting. They have their own language, which is really hard to decipher. It was used as a code language in the World Wars because it's hard to understand what's happening in the language. It's a unique place with a very perceptive sense of humor. So I was honored, and what came out of this was a Czech language version of Truck Dog. And I remember asking them, well, why would you want to do Truck Dog in the Czech Republic, in Prague? And one answer was, well, everyone has a dog. And they all keep them in the city, in the big city, and they all keep them, you know, confined in an apartment. So this piece represents freedom and the vistas of the free realm. So, which was interesting because Czech Republic's history is based on domination by Russia. So there's social, cultural themes that are under here too, of how the dog represents a people, perhaps, finding their freedom through self-expression. And being confined in the truck represents being confined in their country by Russian dominance at that period of time in history. So I found that fascinating. So I think what I'm trying to say is Truck Dog hits elements of the human spirit in a metaphorical way, which is very interesting.
Do you have any footage of his Czech version?
No, but I have a drawing of one of the actors, which I just showed you. So this piece combines movement, simple props, and metaphors that can be related to, that can be understood by many different walks of life. The piece was performed for different genres of culture and was very successful. So I did that for quite a few years. And then recently, about 6 years ago, I did another version with a world-class percussionist on stage accompanying me. And in that piece, the dog plays a saxophone, a jazz blues saxophone at times.
Well, what's his name again?
Who?
The percussionist?
His name is, I can't remember now.
Okay.
I don't care.
Well, you have a saxophone friend too, don't you?
Yeah, he's one of the people you're going to interview.
Yeah. What's his name?
Joe Romano.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay. That might.
I don't know what else to say about
Okay,
this.
well, let's move on.
Yeah.
So what's next?
I remember I did talk about this before a little bit.
I think
You have enough now,
I
yeah.
know twice you talked.
All right. Well, it must be important to me, right? Okay, what's next?
That's good. Pause. Okay. Again. You were saying?
Some of the description of Truck Dog by others, some people called it Easy Rider with a Tail, referencing the famous movie Easy Rider, because there is a journey to New Orleans in this piece. So hence Easy Rider with a Tail. So some of the same themes that were in that movie, I think, are incorporated in this movie. Or another expression was, what's his name? What's the famous playwright that wrote Buried Child and Sam Shepard? Another description was Sam Shepard with a tail.
And is it also about domination of the man, like an Easy Rider?
It's about how authority gets in the way of living a free life at times. Authority can also protect you, but there are boundaries that authority crosses that are not healthy.
So you're looking for what now?
I'm looking for... Okay, so this doesn't have to be in chronology, right?
That's right.
Okay, this is here. While we're here, this is Jimmy, which was done recently. I think you might have even seen that show, maybe at Teatro de las Americas. Do you remember?
Well, start playing it and then you can talk about it.
Yeah, there's two videos here. I don't know which one this is.
The one you just opened is called...
This is, want me to chronicle? This is in the same file of Truck Dog. It's called Jimmy, El Payaso Histórico de Oxnard.
Okay.
Translated, Jimmy, the historical clown of Oxnard. So I'm not sure. There's two videos here. I don't know why one's different than the other. I think it's the same. Anyway, I'll just play one.
I just turned it towards me.
So Jimmy the Historical Clown of Oxnard is one of my more recent creations. And like a painter, painters go through periods of style. So they develop themes over time, and they stay in that area until they move on to another genre. So I've done that in my career. Truck Dog was one. This piece, Jimmy, the Historical Clown of Oxnard. Oxnard is where I was born. So this piece I created late in life, and it's a compilation of sort of all the techniques that I've developed over my 55 years of performing. And it breaks the fourth wall, but it's a little bit of James Donlon's greatest hits as well as new takes on the nature of performance, given my style.
Can you move? Okay, now we're seeing something. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's fine.
I don't know. You don't see much. Yeah, it's there.
Hopefully the light.
Yeah, well, I can go somewhere else in it, like right there.
Okay, good.
This is fish.
Here.
Let me go to the beginning.
Okay.
So this piece, this piece has clowning and classic mime and magic. And it was kind of a salute. I almost took it too personally. It was almost like a salute to who I was. And I had to get it off my chest, whatever that means. The piece was performed in Italy in a version that's very effective. There's some really good footage of that, which we can put on in a moment.
Performed by others?
Yeah, I'll find it. No, me. No, it's one thing about the work I do is you can give work to people, but sorry. Where's the water? A painter wouldn't give a set of paint by numbers to another person to recreate the video unless they were into commercial art of some kind. And I'm sorry. This is where I'm dying. Thank you.
So yeah, a good point.
So a painter wouldn't tell someone to paint the painting. So in the sense, when I create something, it would be hard for someone else to do what I do. I've been asked over the years to commission or to give some of the work to people, which I've done rarely. But I think as I grow older, I might consider that more, in terms of passing work down. But normally, you paint the picture, and you paint the picture. So you create the work. I'm sorry. Yeah. All right, I'm going to go somewhere else. Oops, stop it. One thing that's interesting about, what am I doing? What am I trying to do? Oh, I'll just close it. One thing that, should I have something going when I'm talking? All right, let me go back to that. Let's start right here. There's, one thing that Jimmy represented to me was that it made it clear how the word clown has, and the significance of it has changed over the decades. Like I've talked a lot about how the clown for me is a consummate actor. But today, clowning is, to me, is somewhat of a cliche. It's an entertainment monster. And you're only there to make people laugh, and it's kind of one-dimensional, which is fine to make people laugh. But to me, there's a range that's possible in clowning. So this piece is the Jimmy the Historical Clown of Oxford is kind of representative of this broad image of what a clown should be for a culture. And it doesn't really fit in today's world with the sense of clown. And I wouldn't even know how to market it now, because the understanding of the word mime and clown is so, the stereotypical understanding of mime and clown is so ingrained in the public that they have no reference point to open their minds to other possibilities. I mean, we've gone too far. So there'll be a tipping point at some place in the future where we'll have to start over, which could be a good thing.
Okay. Anything else you want to talk about in your Jimmy?
No.
Okay. We can move on then.
All right.
Pause tape.
So let's.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm gonna pose a question here.
Okay.
So we have Ranch, we have Purge, we have Jimmy, we have works that are. This should be off the tape. I don't know quite what we're. This is this little teeny thing.
Yeah, which I've copied, I believe.
You have?
I have, yeah.
All right, that's Jimmy. An
Jimmy.
Italian performance.
Oh, okay.
There's actually two performances in here of the same show.
Okay,
One's
good.
better than the other, but
Good.
Purge is one, which 3 women and myself.
I don't think we've done.
No, we haven't.
Let me stop tape till you. Let me get that on camera. So,
That sounds kind of
well, you could
pompous,
say,
so to say that.
What would you say set you apart from other artists?
No, I don't want to say it, because I think to me it's pompous. This is in videos,
Okay, this is in.
and it's the sub file is Wrench Purge videos.
Okay, gotcha.
And then there's another little file that says Purge videos.
Okay.
I'll play that. There's one of excerpts. There's a Purge promo. What's the Purge promo? I'm curious. Let me play this a minute. I don't even know what this is. Purge promo television. What's going on here? Why is this happening?
Yeah, why is that
I don't know. What happened?
pause tape? Wrench Purge videos.
And then it says Purge videos. If you go deeper, it says Wrench videos. It says Purge.
Okay, go for it.
So Wrench is something we haven't talked about Wrench either. That's really important, but okay. Where should we start it?
Okay, yeah.
So Purge, or in Spanish, La Purga, was a piece that was inspired by a call from Mexico where they were doing an international festival about the place of women in theater. So at the time, I was in association with 3 actresses, 2 of which had been my students. One had been taking workshops with me in LA. And I decided to create a piece, a full-length piece, about the woman's place in society that we could take to Mexico. So this piece is physical theater, combines clowning, acting, and movement, and it describes the plight through the centuries and through eons of the woman trying to find, gaining their rights and their proper place in a chauvinistic society. So we had lots of humor in it. We had lots of commentary. So the performers in the piece were the 3 women and myself. So the male, James, represented the male figure, in that conflict and that battle between the sexes. So the piece was a journey through a journey of three women, literally a road trip where they gain their power. And the man is placed in his proper place, equal or even subservient a little bit. That's the piece.
Okay.
And it was really well received.
It's interesting that it played in Mexico, which is kind of a machismo culture.
That's right, which was interesting because it is a machismo culture in Mexico, and even more so at that time. Now they have a woman president. And sometimes the women would be whistled at from the audience, in a chauvinistic way, macho way. And so we broke a lot of barriers there. But we would always have a lot of my performances have question and answer periods after. And there was some really interesting, strong discussions that happened post-performance with this issue. So I felt that theater was doing what it was supposed to do. It was provoking thought and introspection in the audience. That happened in two other productions I did, one called Flush and one called Dibujos, where the sessions afterward were very, very rich with discussion of world events and cultural influences.
Do you think you had any effects on any of the audience?
But I have no idea.
You put it out there and you never know.
You never know. I think it's interesting. In some ways, performing these kind of pieces is more dangerous today than it was, because I think people have more tools where they can injure you than they would have had in the past, even though their attitudes haven't changed that much, and people could still be rowdy and aggressive and dangerous. But the technology of today's world puts the tipping point in a much closer realm than it did, in the past.
Like social media, or what tools?
Social media, like guns, transportation, computers. The information is disseminated really quickly. People can, when I say tools, people can injure you or be aggressive towards you with objects that maybe were more scarce in the past. I think the key might be communication. Word travels very quickly now, where in the past it might take 2 months to get across the ocean, the news. So because this information is disseminated so quickly, people's emotions are riled more quickly too, and the geography of where one is in the world is pinpointed in a much more exact way.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the drones are everywhere.
Should we go to Wrench?
Sure. Let me get rid of this. Did you ever see Wrench?
I don't think
No. You'd like it. It's the guys who wrote it with me live in Santa Barbara, actually, but I didn't choose them as in the short list for this people we interviewed. Where are we? Let's go back to this. It's in the same file. Wrench Purge videos. Same file as where Purge was,
Okay.
but it says Wrench videos.
Okay.
Like I say, Wrench has excerpts too, and there's one video that's Purge and Wrench together as just excerpts if you want to.
You can just play the Wrench one.
Yeah, I will. I don't know where this Apple TV thing came from. No, it's not playing. Let me try it. Okay, right there. Boom, boom. Whoop, I turned it off. Boom, boom. Here it comes. Wrench. There's a great quote in the LA Times about this piece. What did they say? I could find it, but it's something to the effect. Wrench is a combination of the Three Stooges, David Lynch, and something else.
Okay, that'd be good to find.
Yeah, I can find it.
Tell me
It's actually, that quote is probably on my website.
Okay.
You know, like, because Wrench, you know that, remember the timeline I showed you on the website where there's photographs and sort of the arc of my life, artistic life? So Wrench is one of the stops on that timeline. And that quote is, and some others of that piece are in that, on that page.
Okay.
So it's there. Yeah, Purge is there too, I think, but Wrench particularly. Wrench was a collaboration. Yeah. Wrench was a very important collaboration for me that has resonance. In fact, I have a tattoo of one of the props I made for this piece still on my arm. I have a tattoo on this side of that floor pattern, which is a Mayan sun symbol. So it's interesting that I didn't get a tattoo until I was 65. And it's interesting that the tattoos I got were related to Wrench. So it does have a very significant part of my being. Wrench is about two brothers. One is a motor whisperer, and what I mean by that is you've heard of the horse whisperer or the cantaloupe whisperer. It's somebody who knows a lot about cantaloupes and can dictate the metaphysical side of what a cantaloupe is. That would be a cantaloupe whisperer. So a motor whisperer is like an ultimate mechanic. Just by looking and being around a machine knows what to do and knows how. One of the famous lines in the piece, which was actually a line my father used to tell me when I was a kid working with tools, he would say, you don't twist the nut too tight, you just want it snug. There's a difference between snug and tight. So working with machines, you don't want it tight, you want it snug. So there's a subtle texture in pressure and in quality that it needs to be different. Otherwise, you injure the machine. And another important thing about that is that my father was a woodworker.
Your glasses in front. No, leave that there. Your glasses in front of the monitor. Your water glass. Okay.
Another important thought or image I have from being a kid is my father caressing wood. He was a very skilled woodworker. A lot of the cabinets in our house were built by him. He also built boats and really knew how to shape wood as an organic living thing. And one of the things he used to do when he was sanding, let's say this tabletop, he would run his fingers in his palm over the wood in a very textural, sensual way. Almost like he was caressing the skin of a lover or something. And he would do that. And I still remember to this day his hands passing over the surface of fine wood. So that you would say he was a wood whisperer in a sense because of that. So that image is actually very important to my skill as a mime because I still have that sense in my hands. They say that the hands and the eyes are the most, or I say the hands and the eyes are the most important thing of a mime. And the hands particularly. So this image just resonated with me as a kid, and it plays, I think it's played out my whole life in terms of how I approach art.
And is it in Wrench?
So the theme of Wrench is about that. It's about what is quality, what is that fine difference between snug and too tight? What is the Epicurean, what is the fine meal that life can be or should be, you know, in its all its glory without some kind of explosion of unnecessary things. Okay, what is the essence of what things are, and what's the synergy of the world? So one brother is the motor whisperer, and the other is this young guy who wants to computerize the shop, bring it into the modern age. But there's the horse whisperer, but the motor whisperer doesn't need that, and also understands how there's a limit to technology, and that these more metaphysical observations and feelings can approach the truth also, and very often technology can get in the way of that. I'm not so sure machines can recreate those moments. Maybe someday, if that ever comes, I don't know what the world will be like. But this piece was about that. So two brothers, and then living in the garage. And the garage itself was a very interesting challenge for us, because we actually used a real car in a real space, meaning that we filled it with real objects that look like a car garage that you might find in the back street somewhere in any American town. In the shop, there's a ghost that lives there, and it's a shaman. It's a Mexican Chicano shaman. And growing up in the West, and also one of the writers, Matt Tavianini and Joseph Velasco, who's Latino, part indigenous by blood also. So we wrote in this shaman that had the understanding of the way things were, where the end of the world was, and the way things were. So the shaman begins to teach through various episodes, subconsciously, the younger brother what quality is and what this means. And then throughout the whole piece, the younger brother, whose dream is to be a race car driver, I mean, he has the beginnings of it's really a piece about age and youth too. He has the ingredients, but he doesn't know how to shape this sense of the motor whisperer. But throughout the piece, he's turning into a motor slowly, into an actual, and then the climax of the piece, he's an engine block, literally, and there's a very powerful scene where we hoist him up with into the air, and we lay him in an engine, compartment, and so the piece again is about searching for the synergy of living and the quality of living, and it was a very successful piece because we had mechanics come to see it, we had professors come to see it, we had intellectuals come to see it. We had everyday working people come to see it. It crossed the boundaries of what the profile of what an audience could be. And we eventually did it site-specific. For example, we did it, at one point, we did a run in a Harley-Davidson motorcycle shop on State Street in Santa Barbara, and converted the actual working bays into this car garage. I'll take a break. Yeah. Yeah. So in Latin theater or theater south of the border, there's a term called magical realism. So what does that infer? So realism is what we recognize as the way things are, and magical is that metaphysical world. So when you combine the two, realism that's magical, you may have surrealism, or you may have poetry that goes under the surface to tell the truth in a very essential way. So Latin American literature and movies very often have a strain of magical realism, some stronger than others. But it's a kind of a shamanistic way of looking at existence. so this piece, Wrench, really played with this concept of magical realism. The realism of the motors, of the garage, the real car, and then this magical part of the ghost, the shaman, the sorcerer who lives in the spirit of the car or the spirit of the garage and interprets reality in an even more truthful way than what's actually there. So you have this collision of magic and authenticity, or that's not the right word, of realism. Realism doesn't have to be authentic necessarily. Okay, so.
Did you play the part of the shaman?
No, I played the older brother, the motor whisperer. There's one section of the piece which is a kind of a tour de force of mime where I travel through the motor. I become miniature and I travel. You have to see it to understand it. You know, this is where that difficulty of explaining this. But I travel through a motor in all its dimensions in a realistic way. Because Matt, one of the writers, was a mechanic and he knew about motors. So we would take this journey to find how to fix this motor, but you're being inside the motor. It's a special section, and it's a mime section that I'm really proud of.
Is that
and it's on video.
Something mime can do easily get into places you couldn't otherwise?
True enough.
Okay,
you answered it right there.
What's the deal?
Yeah, mime has the ability to combine poetry, philosophy, I think the word's didactic information, like information that is, or let's say periodic information that is. I think I'm using these terms right if I remember my science classes from college. So you combine this sense of the metaphysical with the sense of what's obvious. And you come to a conclusion of a truth that is really hard to gain in other ways. And one of the advantages of theater is that it happens in 3 dimensions right in front of an audience. You know, it doesn't happen on the page or through the sound waves. It's there in front of you, and you can see the sweat, and you can see the...
You were saying?
You can see the muscular effort that it takes to be present in front of an audience, and other forms don't do that. So you can stretch the imagination of the audience like a book would, or a song. At the same time, visually, you can see it happening in front of you. So if it's done well, which is a challenge, you have this cathartic experience, the power of theater, even beyond film, because you're right there. You're not looking at like a section of space. You're in this space with this audience and this performer.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, should we go on to something else on the list?
Yeah, let's see what we got here.
Pause tape.
Are you going to have to use, but also it's just...
So you're talking about the podcast, yeah, tell me.
So, a few years ago, I thought to myself, well, there's all this body of work by amazing artists in the mid to late 20th century, and nobody knows who they are. And also trying to continue with that challenge of how do you inform the public about this art form? I decided that a podcast where I and maybe a colleague would interview voices that represented the field of mime and clown, specifically mime.
Was it an audio? It wasn't visual?
So this is a podcast that's visual. It's video. It has a website, and you can also listen to it, you know, through different platforms, you know, just audio-wise.
What's the name of it again?
The mimeradioshow.com is the website. And it's myself and a colleague of mine, Karen Hoyer, who was a former student of mine in the 70s. And here we are 40, 50 years later, and she and I have teamed up to interview representative voices, some very well known, some more obscure, of the art of mime. And we did 40 episodes.
Did you recall one episode you can say something about, an anecdote?
Oh, they're all good. Somewhere better. I mean, well, there's one that's kind of funny, that Robert Shields, who's a very famous, probably the most famous American mime, because he had a network television show, who's a friend of mine. We did most of the interviews by Zoom, if not all of them, and he had poor reception in his mountain home in Arizona. And he would freeze occasionally in the image. But he's a very, very energetic, entertaining guy. And so he would be explaining something or demonstrating something, and he'd stop. And so the effect was this kind of, hey, here I did, and the voice would still go on, maybe. And it was very rock and roll. It was like an art video. And it actually worked. If you go to his interview, it's just an interesting experience for an hour and a half of this guy. It just fit. It fit his character. It fit the art form. It was very surreal and very mad, crazy. So that's what I particularly remember. Yeah.
Can you do a segue sentence by saying something like, the podcast featured a lot of unknown people, but one well-known person was Robert Shields.
Yeah, in the podcast we would feature recognizable voices as well as more obscure people that were important to the art form. And one of the most famous ones was Robert Shields, who was probably America's most famous mime because of his network Shielding of a Nail show.
Did you work with him?
I did. I performed with him much later. We did a sort of James and Robert's greatest hits performance.
Good.
I think I talked about him in Union Square at one point.
Oh, right, you did.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what
you mentioned the podcast, and we can move on to something else.
Yeah. Well,
now we're going to James's film work.
please.
Okay, and this is on the black external hard drive.
This is called Special Videos
Okay,
under the main videos.
gotcha.
So I mentioned this a while ago, but I don't think we were recording. So this is Talking With. Let me pull it up.
What file are you opening?
It's called Talking With, 1995. This is Kathy Bates in 1995 in a PBS special, great performances, called Talking With, which are monologues by women, 7 monologues in their life, okay? Fictitious women. So I was asked to do storyboards for this production, as well as help guide the transference of it's a theater piece, and we were going to put it, PBS was going to put it in a video format. So this is very interesting because I was chosen to write storyboards. One reason being that Talking With is originally a theater piece, and because of my background in theater, and the way I can handle image, it might be helpful for me to create the look as it's translated to video, which is different than theater.
Do you have the storyboards if we need to see them?
Yeah, they're in Oregon. I can get them.
Okay.
They're good, and they're really. You could shoot some of the storyboards just as an image, and then you could show some of this if you're allowed to, and then they look identical. It's really interesting, even to the way. What's interesting about translating a theater piece to video is, in my mind, video and film is very visual. I mean, it's action, meaning that it's visual presence. Where in theater, it should be visual presence, but very often it becomes words. Like if you look at a theater script versus a film script, it's night and day, the amount of words, you know, the dialogue. It's much simpler in film and video than it would be in television than it would be in a theater script, historically. So, my job was to create visual reality more so than you might create. No, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that I would look at the theater script and try to imagine the visual sense of it, because the theater script doesn't describe place, it just describes what people are saying. Just written, they're monologues. Somebody talking, it could be like a talking head. So my job was to place these talking heads in visual spaces for the video, because that's so important. So I created angles and images and realities that aren't.
You were saying?
Yeah, I created a sense of place visually that's not present in the theater script.
You also.
And in terms of action and also the look, you know, what they might be wearing and that kind of thing.
You also worked with her with an axe or something. Was that?
That's another movie. That's Dolores Claiborne. Yeah.
So, okay, that's the storyboard story. And what else with film clips?
Well, I just remembered a story from, I can't remember if I told you. Did I tell you about the last shot in Talking With and what happened there?
I don't think so.
I'll tell you. You can use it, you know. So one of my storyboards, in the script it says there's a marble with the PBS logo shining through it. So that was an important shot for this one story. And the marble was supposed to roll across a hardwood floor and stop. So they were shooting it with a large kind of ball that was about that big. It wasn't a marble, but you know, in the film it would look like a marble. And they had a projection over here that would shine the PBS logo, and the thing was supposed to stop, and then they get the final consummate shot for this one story. So the studio was rented, and we were getting close to the time when either overtime would be charged, or I don't know what the finances were, but we had to get this done in, let's say, half an hour. And they couldn't get the marble to stop, this ball to stop, because they were shooting it on a wooden table that would look like a hardwood floor. And they couldn't get it to stop. So so the logo would shine, or just stop at all. They tried many different things. They put a match down, a little piece of wood to make it roll up against, and things like that. So it was, let's say, 5 minutes are left in the contract, and they can't get this shot, and people are frustrated and like trying everything. So, okay, we got to try this one more time. So they roll the thing, and there was a grip standing by where all he does is he grabs the table and he goes like this to level the surface a little, or to change the level, and the thing stopped perfectly, and they got the shot. So, and then right after that, the time was up. It was just a very cool event. Yeah. I don't know. We done with this?
I think so.
Yeah.
Any-
Yeah, there's more. I mean, there's one called Zoo Food with a puppet. Let me talk about that one. Or we can talk about. Here's People Like Me. There's some good. Actually, there's some good footage in this that you might want to use. It's also on YouTube. There's some stuff that I put up there, or somebody did.
This is called People Like Me.
Yeah, this was a touring show in the Bay Area. In about 2009 or 8. So we're talking almost 20 years ago. And it was a performance that had about 26 to 30 performances around theaters in the Bay Area for school kids to be bussed in to watch. And the theme was different cultural dances from around the world. And my character was the glue. My character was this kind of mad scientist who traveled around the world in his magic car over oceans and over mountaintops to encounter different cultural dances, different. So here's one from India, for example, and my job was to come in and either introduce it or learn from it or interact. So we had hip hop dancers, we had cloggers, this is a form of Indian dance, and then I would have my moments. And I used, in the beginning of the show, I would use some really kind of awe-inspiring mime techniques to get the kids excited. And there's one section where I have an old-fashioned iron, and it gets stuck in space. And so I'm using my point in space, and it sticks on me. And I used mime a lot in that show to break the ice. And then another kind of highlight section was there was a really good hip hop dancer with acrobatics, and and my place was to try to imitate him and do it in my white way, in my Caucasian way, and because the dancer was black and from the street, and it had that effect, and here was me, so it was very funny to poke fun at myself, and the audience loved it, because the audiences were a whole range of identities, Okay. So that was an interesting experience. I think here, let me see if I can find that one section. Actually, it's a good example of the power of. Here's my magic car. Let me see. Where is it? This is called People Like Me, if you want to check it out. Let me find... oh, yeah. We usually did it in big theaters. I'm trying to find... that's okay. There's one section that's pretty kind of magical. Let's see, what else? Video. Here's one called The Magnet, where I was a star, one of the stars of a short film in Prague, but we don't need to look at that right now. I don't know, like Dolores Claiborne is one, but I don't have video of that. That's like a feature film, but I'm trying to, Zoo Food. Here, this is the one to talk about. I think we did talk about this, didn't we?
Possibly. Tell me about it.
Yeah. I will. Let me find the... So Zoo Food was a project at the Santa Barbara Zoo. And they were looking for a puppeteer to operate a $5,000 puppet called Grandpa Nature, which was a character that knew everything about how to feed animals and about animals in general. So this character inhabited magically the Santa Barbara Zoo. And there were 3 kids that were also cast that were supposed to learn from Grandpa Nature about how they fed and nurtured the animals at the zoo. So actually, I can start over, but I did talk about this. We already talked about this, because I remember I talked about Jonathan Winters, and and I talked about auditioning with the puppet. We already talked about that. Yeah, so let's forget that.
Okay. But is there some samples of that in this video?
Lots of them. This character's.
That's the character there.
Yeah, he's the star character.
Gotcha. Okay.
They're all over. Remember I told you there was one scene where I'm cooking hamburger in the zoo as a puppet? Real hamburger. There's all kinds of shots.
Got that.
Yeah. If you could find the one with the hamburger, that would be a good one.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty complex. That's when I explained where I had to look at a monitor that was in reverse and at the same time do stuff.
Right.
You know?
So here's
flip burgers and stuff. Yeah, right. This kid, he became a star football player at San Marcos High School later when he was in high school. Anyway, I think my son's in this one too. Maybe at the end. Let's see.
What year around is that?
It's mid-90s, I think.
Okay.
I'm curious here, just a second. Oops. Oh well. Look at them all.
There's samples of you teaching a class in this external hard drive and videos. And what's this folder? Pedagogy?
This is in videos, and the subfolder is Donlon Pedagogy Videos. Okay. And you can see there's a whole bunch of them.
Okay, teaching videos. Okay.
Yeah, and it's contemporary. Where the ones I showed you before from UCSB are from like 35 years ago. So it's a whole different look, and I'm different.
You want to talk a little bit about teaching? Have one of them going. Have one of those videos going while you're talking.
All right. Let me find one. Here's one where I'm leading something.
Okay.
This is in my studio up north. Teaching has been very important to me. It's equal with performing. So I always believe that when you teach, you think out your process as a performer. You analyze what you do and in what sequences and how you approach it. And when you perform, it keeps you in shape, and you learn by doing, which allows you to teach more effectively because you can do what you teach. And you've also learned it through general practice, through actual trial and error. And I've always enjoyed the process of how things work. And I think I've already talked to you about this. This sounds like I'm redundant. I think I've already talked to you about this.
You may have.
But I can go over it again if you want.
Well, I'm curious, what are some of the things you do when you teach? Exercises?
Okay, when you teach, to me, teaching a good class is like performance. You have to have a good beginning, a good middle, and a good end. You have to communicate. You have to feel the room. You have to read the room. You have to understand when to segue. You have to be a good improviser. You have to be honest, and you have to keep your energy at a high level. So all those things are what you do in performance. So what makes one an effective teacher is to incorporate those same elements. So I also believe that when you teach, the kind of exercises that you use are in reality mini performances. So the student is always encountering the elements that they would need in a performance. And my goal has always been to teach someone to be able to perform on a stage. But of course, the work has also been, not everyone's going to do that professionally. That's just the way the world works. So my job has also produced people in all kinds, or helped to nurture people in all walks of life, whether you're a lawyer, a doctor, a flower vendor, whatever. So, but the main goal is to teach one to be present in their space with a sense of creativity and mastery of the space they're in. In a generous way, let's put it that way. I have to blow my nose. As a basketball player, I enjoyed the practices more than the games because I enjoyed that process of trial and error and progression and understanding how things work.
So it's satisfying to you to teach?
I've always had a great satisfaction in teaching because I've always enjoyed the process, the journey of trial and error and accomplishment, and which is in some ways more truthful than a performance because you fail in a class. You don't know in a class. Even as a teacher, you don't know. So, you learn as much from your students as they learn from you. And I always said that as a teacher, one is only as effective, as talented as the students are, in some ways. I guess you could say maybe, I'm not sure about this. This is something I'm still pondering. But the performance is only as effective as the creative potential of the audience or the imaginative potential of the audience. You know, they're the ones that make the performance. In the end, you just trigger elements within them. Some individuals in the audience may not have the vision to see what you're doing, and so you can't worry about that. You know, you know, I make my statement as an artist. If the audience takes it, they take it. I try to respect the audience. I try to not insult the audience. I try to offer a gift to the audience through a magical palette. If they take it, fantastic. If they can't take it, you have to move on. And that one element is really hard for a young performer. How do you move on without stressing over the fact that you might have failed or they didn't get it? That's the big lesson. And I think as a performer, you're always working in the big picture. And that's related to teaching. When you're teaching, you're always working in the big picture. You're always sometimes withholding information at a certain time. Because you know, the big picture says this, but you have to say, I can't give them this now.
Is that frozen? Is it moving?
Yep, it's frozen. I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
Wonder why I did that.
Oh, it's okay.
Here we go.
So you were saying?
I was saying that I was talking about moving on from failure, I think, wasn't it?
You have to see the big picture.
Oh, you have to see the big, teaching and performance, you have to see the big picture, which is very difficult. I mean, that's probably the journey one takes as a young artist or human, is how do you see the big picture and not worry about the details when they go against you. Maybe understand them and try to understand what happened, but you can't stress over it. That's the hardest thing for anyone to learn. You know, even at my age, you know, you still have to work at that.
Well, what's the value to students of learning this that don't go on to do it professionally?
You learn how to be to see the environment around you and to use the elements in it creatively. So you can apply that to almost anything. You know, it's like living. You understand the synergy between mind and body better, like how those two things are linked. You understand how your hands are actually an extension of your brain, literally through the nervous system. You know, you learn how the other and the personal interact. There has to be a relationship there for life to happen effectively. If one pole of that is negated, life is difficult. You know, sometimes people say, well, what's the difference between theater, acting, and psychiatry or psychology or therapy? Sometimes there's the limit, the borders are really transparent, but I think in the end it's this sense of art, which is, I mean, without being too theoretical about this sense of the urge to communicate one's feelings in a productive way creates art, and there's a craft involved. There are tools involved. There are ways to craft the house better than others. The same way with theater. And one of the things that always attracted me to mime is that the craft, the tools, the structures, the relationships of the formulas are very present, and that's interesting to me. And mime is one art form where its structure is built almost scientifically, and then on top of all that is the human sense of emotion and freedom and creativity that moves things around. To me, that's exciting. You might use that sometime. It's frozen again. I'm not sure why it's. Oh, this is a short video. That's a short video.
Should we go on to another thing on your list?
Okay. Yeah, I'll need to look at it. I think we're getting to the point where well, you have Dream Mechanic. You took a lot of video of that.
Well,
You also talked to Luciano, he's an example of international collaboration.
true. Did you talk? I shot Dream Mechanic. I'm trying to think whether you talked about how much you talked about it. Could you talk about it briefly?
Yeah. What do you want running on this?
Well, nothing could have nothing unless you have it right there. But
I don't think I have a video. I think the video I have is.
so
I must have it, but I think it's because you said. Oh, it's still on the link. I never downloaded it or anything.
why don't you talk?
I mean, I can find the link.
Talk about Dream Mechanic a bit, and I don't have the screen in the shot.
Okay. Dream Mechanic, one of my most recent, if not the most recent piece I've done. Here I am, 78 years old, and I created this piece called Dream Mechanic. It's totally related to everything I've been talking about. It's about how things work, surrealism. People always said I've been really affected with the dream state. And what does that mean? It means taking information and images and not worried about the order in a realistic way, finding how they relate poetically to find the essence. So this piece, Dream Mechanic, literally is about an old man who has nightmares, and he needs a dream mechanic, a professional dream mechanic to help him, help him process the nightmares, or to eliminate them, or to understand them. So this piece has language, it has mime, it has theater, it has simple props, and it's a story that has continuity. So in one sense, it's about dreams, but there's a sense of direction in it. It's a new piece. It still needs to be developed. But because the material is so universal, I collaborated with an Argentine actor, very talented guy named Luciano Brindisi, to create a version. The original version was with Albert Smith, a local actor. But this last piece, we did a tour of California, and I think we'll probably be doing it in Latin America and other places in the United States and theater festivals in the future. Very exhausting. I've got a cough. That's what you should put in the video. Just me choking.
Do you want to mention anything about Luciano? There's your walker.
What way? Other than he's representative of.
How did you know? How did you know him?
Okay.
And has he kind of retired in acting, but wanted to do this piece with you?
Not really.
Okay.
He's.
He has a voice problem now, right? A speaking problem.
Yeah, he has not MS, but another. He has the elements of a nervous disorder. Luciano is an example of the power of a physical theater art, because you're allowed to travel around the world, and there are no language barriers and no other barriers, because you're working with universal truths and also in a visual sense. And people are the same everywhere in the world. So my collaborator in Dream Mechanic, Luciano Brindisi of Argentina, is a very famous and accomplished comedian, one of the best mimes I've ever seen in Latin America. And he is an example of how doors open, and you're able to share and to work with people from other parts of the world, which is phenomenal. You can't always do that in other art forms. And theater, by generally, is a communal art form. People would say, "Oh, mimes, that's the single guy in the whiteface." But I've had many companies. Mime is theater, so that means that you can have a group of people working on a project. So, it's working with a colleague on a mime project is fine.
How does it open doors?
Because there's no language barrier. You don't. I mean, a lot of people speak English in the world today, all over, because it's become kind of the language of business, American capitalism. So, with the mime work, you're able to enter cultures in other ways which aren't limited by not knowing the language. Also, most other countries have a much more adventurous theater scene than the USA. USA is, people watch television and not even go to movies so much anymore. They get everything they need through the television, through streaming and so forth, these new platforms. And, that American culture is built on that. So going to a live performance is rare, unless it's family or friends, very often. And it's very expensive to create theater these days in a wide sense. So economically, there's barriers. So when you travel to other countries, you see how maybe the absence of technology has allowed for a more fertile imagination in some of the artists, and how live performance, going to a cafe and having coffee or a drink on the sidewalk happens in the USA now, but that was originally, the source of that is Europe or other countries. So what that means is people commune in a different way in other countries. They communicate and they interact in a different way. Most countries don't have as many cards as we do. So there's more interaction on the sidewalk or in a cafe, where a lot of us spend our time in a car going from one place to another, more solo existence. So this sense of community that's present in other countries has sparked dialogue and artistic sharing. And so the theater art tends to be much more adventurous, I would say, than American art.
Did you go to work with Luciano in South America?
I toured there. We didn't work on a project there. He was helpful in setting up performances for me. But we were present in a international mime festival. That's where we met in Colombia, the country of Colombia, in Cali, Colombia. That's one of the other advantages of being a mime or a physical theater artist, is you find yourself performing in events, international events, where you have a wide body of guests. So you're able to meet people from different parts of the world, and relationships start and professional projects start, and that's how that world operates.
And I guess since you don't need language as much for mime, you're able to perform with different people for different audiences. You kind of said that.
Yeah. You find a common ground. Like, I perform for all age groups, seniors all the way down to kids. Sometimes the material is selected differently, but the tools involved to create the pieces for these audiences is the same. It comes back to being present in a space, being watched by a group of people, and providing stimuli for them that hits their emotions, moves themselves, makes them think, and when they leave, they have different sensations. When they leave the theater, they have different sensations within them. That's the goal. That's the goal. I mean, one of the best performances I ever did was for an audience of 6. in a giant hall on a rainy, cold night in Ireland, a performance of Truck Dog. We all went to the pub afterwards, after our little party of 6 audience members and 1 performer, and we had a fantastic time. And the work itself blossomed because it was very intimate, very intimate. The audience was right there. I think I talked about that before, actually, about something like that. Yeah.
Okay, should we move on?
I don't know what's left,
Okay,
really. I mean,
I'm gonna pause tape.
small. This has some pretty wild performing on
Okay,
it.
so this is that tiny little
Yeah,
thumb drive.
yeah, and you
The name
need
of it is James and Alina.
James Alina. It's her show's on it too. But here's a question and answer. But the show here, you have to see this here. This is a good example of the language barrier stuff I was talking about. So it says Jimmy. I did talk about Jimmy today.
Right.
It's all these are all the video. It's in sections. So each one of these is maybe 5.
Why don't you
Set.
play one while you're talking?
Yeah, I'll play that one, for example. That's still the beginning of the show, I think. Oh, let me go back to... One thing that's significant about this is and mime songs, I sing. I'm a singing mime. That's something we should talk about, probably.
Okay, yeah.
But let me play one that has better light. Let's see. I don't know, I can just play it. Oh, I guess that is full. Doesn't go all the way full,
Okay,
does it?
that's okay. It was
Yeah.
recorded.
So, this performance, Jimmy, Historical Clown of Oxnard, I performed internationally in Europe. This video is a performance in Italy. And one thing that's interesting there, which I've done before in my past, I had a character many years ago called the Commodore, which was a retired admiral in some fictitious navy. And he would speak in gibberish. Off the record here, you have actually in one of those videos, NCSA that you have, there's a whole rendition of Commodore in there of him talking and doing all kind of. You'd have to find it, but it's that NCSA. It's in this one. It's in that video. Or is it in the 19? It might be in the 1980, which I think is in this one. It's that lecture demo I did which is a good one. It has mask work and it's shot professionally, mask work, clown work, acrobatics. I showed it to you. But this Commodore is in there.
Did you show it to me, you say?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I didn't. I don't know if you took note of it where it was, but
Tell me about the Commodore.
yeah. So the Commodore was a character I had, a clown character, theater clown character. I first created in the 70s. And he would speak in gibberish. He was a retired admiral from some fictitious navy, and he would speak in a make-believe language. And when I would be performing internationally, whether in Mexico or Italy or Germany or Spain or Switzerland, I would find key words that I thought I needed in the home language. So for example, if I was performing in Mexico, he would go, "Je l'acabé de tisser la mandotifi. Buenos dias." So I'd pick little elements of the real language of the region to communicate with. And that's the way he talked. But most of it, excuse me, but most of it was this make-believe language, which had a sound somewhat like a cross between French and Italian or Spanish, kind of a mix of that. So I would always think of language as a gesture, that it was a movement, and that movement was always a language. So if you think like that, you have an interesting merging of communication skills that actually communicate. So I had an interesting story about this gibberish. So this Commodore was performing in Switzerland one year back in the 70s. And after the show, someone asked me, "Are you Polish?" I said, "Why?" "Because the language you were using is Polish, correct?" And I said, "No, no, 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 this is gibberish." So I was trying to figure out why it sounded like Polish to them. They thought I was actually speaking Polish. So it could be, it's their reference point for one thing. But also, I remember my metaphor for creating this language was a kind of a Hollywood Western grade B movie where the Native Americans would talk. You know, whatever that was. And even I didn't know what I was doing, but that was I'm speaking like an indigenous American Indian. And I used that kind of as a base, but also would throw in the French kind of Italian influences or Spanish influences. But on this particular night, I think I was talking pretty much like a Polish person. But the image was this Hollywood thing. But so this show here is Jimmy in Italy. And I did the same process here. I would learn some Italian words to communicate when I really needed to, but then I would speak in gibberish the other time, or not at all, and just use Italian as a gesture. So I thought that was interesting. So later, did a performance just recently in the last year or two, probably the last show that I've created, besides Dream Mechanic, is mime songs. So the word song is critical. So I came to think, I've always thought of mime pieces as songs. They've always been songs. Okay, what do I mean by that? So you have I have a concert, right, of a singer. So you have different songs in the concert, right? They're all different moods and they're staged in particular ways for their mood element. You might have a crazy up-tempo song here, and the next one's a very soft love song or something. I mean, that's the way concerts operate, whether it's a band or a singer. So I'm going, a mime concert's the same way. It's like they're songs, not only in their method of communication, meaning they evoke moods and sensations in the audience, but the way the performance is structured is like a lineup of songs. This piece is wild and crazy. This piece is more subtle and mysterious. And you go, a chapter in a book. This chapter's gets you in a certain place, and the next chapter switches you over to another place. So the writer, any artist has to be aware of tempo and mood, right? So then I said, well, why don't I sing sometimes while I'm performing? And I did. So one of my most recent pieces called Walk on the Clouds, or it's called Pipe Dreams, sorry. It's inspired by a painting called Walk on the Clouds by my friend Joe Romano. Inspired me to create this coming of age piece. It's almost autobiographical of my life through poetic images. And in that piece, I sing. Fly me to the moon, da 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 da. And I perform at the same time physical motion. So that happens in several other places in the performance where I suddenly have decided, well, I'm going to make song or vocalization be a movement. And it works. And it's funny because ever since I was a young kid, people used to say I had a good voice, but I was always too shy to use it in that way. So I found my release through movement. But now, finally, after 70 years, I can use my voice like a movement and feel good about it.
That's good.
And yeah, I didn't sing too well then because I feel sick. But so this piece, Mime Songs, there are some elements of that. I also learned to play, I went crazy over the ukulele, so I've also played the uke. Now, this is something very interesting, playing a musical instrument in the show. So I first did that in the 70s with a recorder. Recorder is a very delicate, sweet-sounding instrument that requires very subtle finger motions and breath control to play it properly. So one of the most challenging things I ever did was doing something very aggressive, like acrobatics on the stage, and in the next moment having to play a recorder. So that requires a total recalibration of your energy. And it's really difficult to do, but I would challenge myself to do that, and I learned how to do that. So then I was playing the banjo, same thing, picking, because I lived in North Carolina for a while, worked and lived in North Carolina with its bluegrass and traditions and, Appalachian traditions. So I learned how to pick a banjo. I would use that in Europe in performances, and people loved the sound of the banjo. Even though I had played just basic chords in a picking style, they would think it was great. But what made it great was because a character was doing it. I wasn't a musician doing it. I was a character doing it. And then I experimented with a trombone. There's some photographs of me on a unicycle playing a trombone because I thought it visually would look interesting, having one wheel below you and the trombone, and then the spit valve. It was a trombone that had been a high school band castaway that someone gave me, and the spit valve was rotted out. So I put a sock to like close the valve, and so the sock is flowing in the wind as I'm writing and playing. I wrote one song on the trombone called Circus Waltz that a high school band might have played. And then I decided to learn how to play the saxophone, the alto sax. And I would incorporate that in my performances. And I still had the same challenges of adapting energy to a musical instrument, to the mime technique. It's very difficult to do, to go back and forth. It takes a lot of practice. But this idea of sound and so forth has been very interesting to me. And then traditionally, musical instruments are used by clowns throughout, the centuries. That there's something with music and the clown world that merges very effectively. There's those genre of the musical clown, which is important. So the last piece I did was called Mime Songs, using the ukulele and actually singing in some of the pieces while I move.
So you've learned quite a few different skills to do your work.
Yes.
What are some of the different skills you've learned?
Singing, playing a musical instrument, acrobatics, speaking with volume and clarity in large spaces, riding a unicycle, juggling. Yes, how could I forget that? The thing about juggling is, having been an athlete, I was very enthusiastic about juggling in the beginning. It was an athletic event. In fact, juggling today, outside of Cirque du Soleil or Cirque, is considered almost like an athletic event, because if you go to these world congresses of the best jugglers in the world, they're all dressed in gym outfits, and there's no performance style. It's all just how many numbers and how many different objects can you do. So it's more of an athletic event, almost like an Olympic event. You have what they call it rhythmic gymnastics in the Olympics, is actually juggling, because and usually it's a woman's event where they're throwing these objects and manipulating them as they're doing gymnastics at the same time. But it's juggling. So I was really enamored by juggling because, I just having concluded my basketball career, I like balls and objects, and I would use the skill as a icebreaker for audiences in rural areas in the United States. I think I mentioned some of that. So I would practice, and my goal was they say that if you don't know how to juggle 5 objects, you're not a juggler. So my goal was to always be able to do 5 objects in front of an audience. And I was able to do that eventually. But then I began to understand that this takes so much time, Some people, you know, I had to work at it hard. And even to go further with this, I would have had to become obsessed by juggling and to spend so much time doing it that it would have taken me away from my other interests as a performer. So at one point, not that long ago, I gave it up. And I only use it as a recreational thing or as a, as a meditation. Because there's so much time required to learn the high skills. I remember hearing stories of some of the great jugglers of the 20th century. This one guy had jury-rigged this apron around him, suspended off his shoulders, and he would walk all day around juggling multiple balls, and if one dropped, it'd just fall into the umbrella here, and he could just pick it up without having to bend over and continue. So there's a kind of a maniacal obsession with jugglers that I felt I shouldn't be doing eventually because it would take me away from too much time invested.
You mentioned once you learned to do acrobatics later in your 30s.
Yeah, early 30s.
So tell me why you learned that and how that added.
That was inspired by one of my mentors, Dimitri, the famous clown from Switzerland who's since passed away. He would incorporate a backflip or a handspring or a handstand in his performance, and it would always generate a lot of enthusiasm in the audience. And then his curtain call was astounding. I remember when I first saw him perform, instead of just bowing, he would do a line of gymnastic movements, like handspring, backflip, or just a backflip. You know, he'd be out there in the audience, yay, and then he'd do a backflip, and the audience would just go crazy. So I said, I got to learn that. So I didn't really meet him until my late 20s. So I started late with this idea of turning a backflip or doing other acrobatic feats. And it always was so magical to me to think about, oh, a human being standing on the ground can leap into the air and turn a circle in the air and land on their feet. I thought that was just superhuman, like aliens did that kind of stuff. So that was that other attraction. So I put my mind to learning how to do it. So I took some gymnastic classes. I basically learned by observing the technique. Some of the techniques are not that difficult. You just have to do them with courage because you're upside down, or you have to trust that physics will make your body do a certain thing. You know, so the basic movement of doing a backflip or a back handspring, I could sort of analyze what was happening once someone told me the basics. And then you had to practice. And a lot of it's mental. Like I would psych myself out. I'd do a crash, you know, I'd fall awkwardly, and then I'd have to work my way up to back because I was, you know, in danger of breaking my neck or something, let's say. You know, I would think like that. So I can remember many, many days, like it would be a good video, like being in there, and I'd crash and I'd go out in the hallway of the studio and I'd stomp up and down the corridors, and I'd come back and I'd throw my body in the air, and finally I'm just going to throw my body. So you'd have a soft mat and you just throw yourself into the air. And then eventually you'd start doing the proper technique and you'd be able to do it again. So I learned to do it on hard floors. There was a period of time in my prime where I could just do a flip at any time. I've paid the price. I have arthritic wrists from doing handsprings on the floors and so forth. It breaks your body down eventually if you don't have the proper surface of the landing spot, or you do it too long in life. And it did get the proper reaction. You know, you could throw a backflip and a curtain call, and the audience would go crazy. You know, when actors do something physically unusual, like a backflip or a backflip, or play a musical instrument, you can do very basic things, but the audience's imagination expands the feat into something wonderful. has something to do with the human being, which the actor represents, and then they do this kind of advanced skill. It creates the illusion of this super person. It's very interesting. So in the clown art, in the mime art, you want to project the illusion of doing something fantastical very often through techniques which are hard to learn, some of them. Some of them are not as hard as you would think. But if they're well placed, this magical reality is created.
Anything else on your list, or should that wrap it up?
There was one thing I just thought about that maybe the Piper's Voyage. You have that on video, so you have it in these. Let me make sure. I think it's in the hard drive. Yeah, I did talk about Desert Cafe, but I'll talk about this version of it.
Yeah.
So Desert Cafe was originally.
This is from the mime video thumb drive. Go ahead.
That's yeah, and it's called Desert Cafe.
Right.
This rendition of Desert Cafe, the camera was on stage with me. There were two cameras, and it was edited together by whoever did it. But this is a piece that happens in the mind of someone who might have lived or worked in a gas station cafe in the middle of the Mojave Desert. The surrealistic plateau or panorama of the desert, the California high desert. And it's very athletic. It was actually, a modern dancer actually commissioned me to put it on them at one point because it had elements of movement. Lots of props. There's acrobatics in it. I do handstands. I juggle. I use my voice. There's Hank Williams music on the soundtrack occasionally. This was a piece that I did right before I did a tour in Ireland. I didn't with Truck Dog. So this would have been created in the 90s. I was in strong physical shape. I've been lifting weights, and it's a very consuming piece with all kinds of elements like juggling unusual ways, acrobatics, voice, wild dance kind of music, and imagery which is surreal. And I've never seen anything like it elsewhere. It's got an interesting, well, this is distorted here, but it's got an interesting soundtrack. This was at a theater called Theater on Tahunga Boulevard, right off of Hollywood Boulevard. There used to be a small theater that. Anyway, it would be an interesting one for you to look at.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to sit there and see if I can transfer it to my.
Yeah, but you need.
What are you telling me about? Go ahead.
So on our podcast, I mean, I did talk about the podcast earlier, right? Yeah. Today. Yeah. So one of the features on the podcast was a section called Rapid Fire. And it would start, we'd be talking to the person, and then suddenly you'd hear an audio of a holocaust of flames. And I'd start doing this. It's getting hot in here. It's getting hot in here. And maybe if I had water, and Karen would say something, and we go, oh, it's time for rapid fire. So it was a game where it was word association. So I would beforehand have a series of terms, words that I would tailor them to the guest. And we would throw words, and then they had to improvise quickly each word. So it was fun. So there was visual and sometimes vocally, mostly visual because they're mimes, and it was a fun section. And then sometime in the first few interviews, Karen would take the time to make a gift for them that they'd get in the mail before the interview, and they would open the gift, which would be a surprise on camera. They wouldn't know what it was. And we would do silly things like, I'm trying to think of one. Like for example, and some people, like for this one, I can't remember, it's something like this. There would be a nail or something in the box. They were usually like fun, sort of satirical gifts. One was a nail, something like that. And the artist would open it and it would say, "This is a nail from the stage when you performed at this place." And the person would go, "Really? Wow." Like some of them actually thought it really was the nail, but it wasn't, of course. And one of them was empty. You know, it was like, "This is the spirit of Marcel Marceau," or something, that when you were talking with him or something. You know, like we would do these. And then Karen lost energy. But
So tell me about Marcel Marceau, what you thought of him.
Well, he was the first mime I ever saw.
Say Marcel Marceau.
Marcel Marceau was the first mime I ever saw on network TV in 1955, black and white TV, doing some short movements on the Ed Sullivan Show, the classic variety show of its time. And I remember being mesmerized by what I saw. I think all he did was walk against the wind in place and lean on a mantelpiece. Those are two of his classic moves. I remember going, "Wow, that's cool." And then I forgot about it for decades, 20 years after. But he was the original influence or the original doorway to my awareness of what a mime was. Classic white face. And then years later, I met him a few times after performances. One was, it's a funny story where I had a mime company in 1971 or 2, and he was performing in Northern California, and I arranged a rendezvous right after his show at this theater in Redding, California. And I remember going to the performance, and I went backstage. He knew I was coming. And I could see through the door to the dressing room, and he was kind of tired and hunched over. And somebody said, "Monsieur Donlon is here," or whatever. And I saw him go. He inflated up into his full French self, which is not very tall, shorter than me. And he walked into the hallway gallantly. And I remember he did all the talking. And maybe the conversation, the one-sided conversation lasted for 5 minutes or less. And then he leaves. And then 2 weeks later, I got a signed glossy 8x10 photo of him in the mail with a little note that says, "I don't remember if I met you or not, but here's a photo." So that was my second interaction with him. And then much later, I spent several hours with him in a private residence of Dimitri the Clown in Switzerland, just the two of us on a couch, looking over the coffee table books of his life that were there. And that was a very interesting conversation.
Well, he wasn't the first mime, obviously.
No, mime is, he studied from a man named Etienne Decroux, a French teacher who he's called the father of modern mime, Etienne Decroux. And Marceau only stayed a short period of time, and he left and did his own thing. But there was always a tension between the two of them, apparently, because Marceau brought it to the public, to the popular audience, and Decroux was more of a artist in the basement kind of guy with the true integrity of the art form.
Did Marcel kind of bring it to the attention of
to the world? I mean, he toured touring was his life. When I met his secretary once, and she said that touring was his life. So he would do, he would tour like 10 months out of the year, for years and years and years, all over the world.
What did you think of his stuff?
His style wasn't for me. I mean, in the beginning, I was influenced by the art form itself, but eventually my style is much more athletic. It's less balletic. In other words, his style, he carried himself usually very tall, and I was very much with the earth. My original teacher was Japanese, so there was more of a sense of connection to the ground, like as you might see in a martial art, for example. And sports, like basketball played a big influence on me in terms of how you use space. And then his material was not as political, even though, interestingly enough, Marceau had a whole body of work he never performed much for the public that was much more creative, in my mind, and much more concerned with social commentary. Because, as you know, he was a war hero in World War II in terms of bringing Jewish kids out of, sneaking them across the border out of Nazi Germany. You know, he was part of that the resistance as a young man. So he had, and he did some pieces that were like sort of like anti-war and very humanistic, but his agents, as I'm told, never convinced him or didn't want him to perform because they weren't commercially viable enough for the general public, maybe too controversial. So he always had very powerful agents, I mean, the best, that really directed and formulated his career.
But he didn't do political stuff because of...
Not overly. And so I've seen some of the work that's hidden, so to speak, that's much more political and more subversive in a way. But he never performed those for decades for the public. Yeah, very, very big influence on the whole world of mine. There's never been anyone like him since. Robert Shields went to study with him. He was selected off the sidewalk by a scene on the sidewalk in front of the Wax Museum in Hollywood, where Robert Shields, when he was a young guy performing as a mannequin, Robert Shields always had amazing technique, and so Marceau pulled up in a limousine, the story goes, and was just enamored of Robert Shields' presence and said, "You must come study with me." And so Robert Shields lived at his house in Paris, but he only stayed for 2 weeks. And then felt that he was being kind of pigeonholed, and Robert left and came back to the States, and the rest is history, you know, so.
Should we see if that...
Yeah, let's see. Anyway, that's the